What you're about to listen to is the first episode of Right Pack Radio. It was recorded on March the 2nd, 2014 by the Right Pack. It was originally recorded live in front of an audience at a bookstore in the St. Louis area. The Right Pack is a group of writers and authors who had either been published or were seeking to be published. And they were exploring the avenues of the writing industry. Many of them are officers of professional writing organizations inside St. Louis. Please stay tuned for the following episode, which was Amusing the Muse, and forgive us ahead of time for all the first-time mistakes that this episode had.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
I am David Allen Lucas, your host for Right Pack Radio. I am an author of science fiction, mystery, horror, and poetry. With me today is
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits. I have out a book now, Jack the Ripper in St. Louis. It takes you back to 1897 St. Louis, a place where the real Jack the Ripper may have died in 1903.
I'm Jennifer Stolzer. I write YA fantasy, and I illustrate children's books and anything else.
I'm Matt McGraw. I'm an amateur prose writer mostly, although I did some screenwriting in college. Currently, I'm working on a book with Jennifer here called Patrick the Spider, a picture book.
I'm Jamie Kickover. I write middle grade and young adult science fiction and fantasy, and yes, I really am a rocket scientist.
I'm Brad Cook, author, publisher of Blank Slate Press, and president of St. Louis Writers Guild.
I'm Melanie Colaney. I write science fiction and fantasy, and for some reason I just started a cookbook, and I also have a day job working as a research scientist.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Kayembe. I write under a pen name, LGBT fiction, and paranormal romance, and urban fantasy, and I think magic is the coolest thing ever.
And speaking of magic, today's topic is the Muse. Yes, that insane thing that seems to drive all of us writers, completely off the edge. It has known to drive some writers to drink. Other ones, we just go straight to the page and start writing. I don't know about anybody else here at the Right Pack, but I know when I get approached, hey, where do you get your ideas from? My real response, though I don't say it, is I have no clue where a lot of these things come from. In ancient days, the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans believed that the muse was actually an entity or a deity unto itself that talked to the artist. And what over the centuries that has changed. Where do you get your muses from?
I was going to say, with relation to the Greeks and Romans, Elizabeth Gilbert has a TED Talk about creativity that will tell you more about the things that you just outlined.
Excellent.
Well, you know, Dave, when you said the word muse, I said to myself, I don't have a muse. Everything comes from the old being right up here. But then, I thought about it, and something told me, yeah, maybe you do have a muse somewhere. And where is it? And how do I know that I had one? It's because of writing Jack the Ripper in St. Louis. It's set in a newspaper office, so of course there had to be a chief editor. And I had absolutely no trouble finding the name for this chief editor because, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have categories of names. And I try to find one that matches in meaning and sound. And I have a lot of trouble with that. It can take me days to think of a name. But this one came to me just like that. And it's Suetonius Ham.
That came to you like
it
that?
Did.
Wow.
Just like that. Suetonius. But even though I had 2 years of high school Latin, I had no idea who Suetonius was. So I had to look him up. And it turns out that he was absolutely perfect. He was a librarian. He was a writer. He wrote books about children's games and pop culture in ancient Rome. And he wrote books about famous whores. Now, let me tell you, it doesn't get much better than that. And so that's why my muse is Suetonius.
And it's the perfect symbolism in your story, considering Jack the Ripper went around killing whores.
Oh, you're so right.
So have you looked him up, and do you have a library of Suetonius works now?
Well, now, if you want me to go into the lives of the famous Caesars, which is, by the way, how we know about the Caesars, because he wrote everything down for 14 Caesars. But he also wrote about poets, and he wrote about grammarians and speakers, and he was just an all-around great guy. But it would take me many volumes to tell you anything about, say, Julius, Augustus, Titus, Nero, and Caligula. I could go on for hours about just those two.
They were kind of crazy.
Kind of crazy? Oh my
Are
God.
we all kind of crazy?
Yeah,
I
but-
listen to the voices in our head.
We don't burn down cities and play violins, though. We just write about all the people burning in the cities.
I've burned down cities before.
No. The violin was not
Not the
invented.
violin, but like
It was
he's
a
playing-
liar.
There we go.
And
That one.
Suetonius was the one who wrote down that it was a liar.
He's officially my favorite
Any
person
major
ever
game.
right now.
And just while we're talking about Suetonius, before we get back to the Muse, I don't know if anyone has ever read Robert Graves' I, Claudius and Claudius the God.
No.
But a lot
Based
of
on Suetonius.
Yes. Okay.
Suetonius is still a super rad name.
It is.
I love it.
Super rad.
Super rad. Hey, do I get a turn?
No.
Go
Are
for
we
it.
going around? All right.
Where?
What? You're just gonna take it out of my hand?
I didn't
Go
think
for
it. Well, just go.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. All right. Well,
first
my
bring my own
muse.
mic.
I tend to craft my own muses when I'm writing a story. I usually start with the ending. Like I paint a scene, and in that scene, I think about who's in there and how they're acting, and the rest of the book is kind of written to make that scene like powerful. So like my main character is often my muse because I want to make sure that his or her conclusion is going to be like a punch. Or in my current novel, the supporting character is a muse because he is my lead character's motivation. So they come to life inside me and they drive me to continue.
It's
Do you have
interesting that
trouble
you
with the names?
I don't have trouble with the names, no, they're all puns. Thank you, though. I know who to come to since you find these gems of names.
You do the exact opposite. You know, you start with the ending scene. My problem with a lot of my stories is that I kind of write as fiction, like it's a history. So the idea is develop their entire lives and then tell a portion of it. But their lives go on. And even if the main character dies, there are other people around. So I just continue on with the story of their lives. So there's not really a definite ending.
All right, well, I'm killing all the things, and not on paper. On that note, it sounds like we're getting into writing strategies and our process, and I wanted to know if you guys are separating the muse from inspiration, because for me, often something will inspire me to start writing, but it won't necessarily be what keeps me writing later. It might be cut out entirely.
Well, let me throw right in there. So, thank you. You actually gave me a perfect segue to describe how my muse works. And the reason I did that is my muse, I figured out only the other day how this thing actually worked. And the only way to really explain it, I always thought, maybe I'm always trying to be too precise with what I'm doing and so forth. No. I've actually got two aspects. And if you've ever seen the movie, What About Bob? You will understand how my muse works. And if you have not seen it, 1989, go look it up. Richard Dreyfuss and Bill Murray. Bill Murray is a character who has every psychosis possible. And Richard Dreyfuss is a psychologist who's going to be interviewed by Good Morning America. And he's very precise. He's got everything in order, clean house type thing. Well, the clean house type thing is me. And my muse turns out to be Bill Murray, who just jumps in there, starts wearing the guy's pajamas, sleeping, not sexually, but sleeping with the family. He invites himself.
And we went
Not
there.
sexually.
We weren't gonna do that before.
Yeah.
so
He doesn't-
we don't have a
Yeah.
choice.
Bob doesn't see people like that.
Yeah, Bob doesn't see people like that.
He keeps his pajamas on.
Yeah, he keeps his pajamas on. And Richard Dreyfuss' character literally ties him up, puts, if I remember right, gasoline, and I think maybe even dynamite around him to knock the character off. And the the explosion does not happen. I'm sorry, spoiler
Spoiler
alert.
alert, jeez.
But
This is
Bill
a
Murray
comedy.
believes that he's been cured of all his psychosis by death therapy. This is the way my muse and I work. Complete insanity.
Yeah, I would say that too, but in response to Kathleen's question, it all kind of comes at me like a Mack truck all at once. Because I write a lot of science fiction, I am constantly asking what if, and I'll just see something and then all of a sudden I'll go, well, what if this? And then the next thing I know, there's all these characters coming at me in my head, and, it doesn't matter where I am, all of a sudden I'm writing something and it just takes over my body, and it's like I got struck by an arrow. So that's why I named my muse Orion. Because
You named your muse.
I named my
wow.
muse. His
That's
name
adorable.
is Orion. And he's a little pain in the butt sometimes.
Is the galaxy on his belts?
He does. Well, and I had to go to science fiction end. I mean, constellations. Can't get more science than that. So
She is a rocket scientist.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So he shoots me with arrows, and oftentimes at the most inconvenient possible time, like when I'm driving, when I'm in the shower, any place you can't have a pencil or a computer. So yeah.
Yeah.
Actually-
You tend to do that.
I feel kind of a kinship with that, although how I think of it isn't quite as pretty. I always kind of likened it to like vomiting almost.
Wow.
Like how I look at it is, first I have to go around and I have to eat up like ideas from various areas that aren't necessarily connected.
Okay.
And
I follow.
you have to. I go around, eat them, and they go down, and they digest for a while, and they sort of turn to a nice little slurry mess together. And then suddenly, I'll just be sitting around with a blank page in front of me, just. Well, that's the good. That's the good ones. The worst is when it's like a dry
That's the
heat
good one.
kind of thing. Where it's like I'm trying to get it going, and it's just like, and it's not going.
I'm getting that Mean Girls vibe over here, the whole word vomit thing.
Yeah,
No,
the
wait,
little
real
word
vomit.
So it'd be more like the vomitorium, I guess, would be the Roman thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Oh my
I look
goodness.
I see it as like an organic process, and so I try not to.
Yeah, it's very natural.
So should we call libraries vomitoriums now? Because that's
Let's
kind of what
not.
they
Let's
are.
Not really. I think we want more kids to
Is that
read.
why Alexandria burned down? Is
No,
that
we
why
could
that
call-
library went?
I think it's
They
more
called it the
accurate to say
vomitorium,
that
didn't they?
school is a vomitorium, because that's where the writing
I was
happens
gonna
mostly.
say, I don't know that.
Because,
vomit
it's
burns,
more
but
like the library would be just a bucket of other people's vomit.
Yes.
There's no actual vomiting going on in the library. It's just where you store everybody else's.
So it's more like what is
It's
it?
a
Like a
toilet.
septic tank.
Well, except here's my question with that. Schools have now been classified as killing creativity.
Yes.
Mostly because they're doing tests that are being required by some MBA who's translated some law into some way. And it makes absolutely no sense. So the kids are vomiting back really what they're being tested on. So
They're
No, that's the
vomiting
problem. They're vomiting
they're
other
given.
people's vomit. They just get the
Exactly.
vomit right in, and then it goes
I'm
right
gonna
back
be
out.
ill if we
So let's get back to the muse. Sorry, I did that.
So, you, Matt, had said vomiting. I have heard it explained, I think, by Madeline Lingle as stew. And, because
No, it's just the vomit and stuff.
Yeah.
there's a lot of
I don't think you can
percolation.
keep
So,
down
We're
with
not
that
getting
and-
lunch
and
after
not,
this.
yeah.
oh my goodness.
It's much nicer.
I can't do food references right now.
I
It's
think
not going
it's
to work
more
after the
like a-
vomit conversation.
Because you collect things from all kinds of areas, and you,
could
have
equate
50
it
different
to
things
building
you're
a
doing.
building. You know,
I think
you've
are
got
you
blocks
building
and
50
pieces
at the
that are
same
going
time?
up. You can.
If you're a contractor.
That's called, putting up condos or something. But can we do something besides food references?
I think it's more like a
Building
hostile
condos of the
takeover.
mind.
Like, a hostile takeover. It just
Well,
like,
Brad,
you're
what's your
forced
muse
to put
like?
the-
Is your
Well, see,
muse
that's the
like
funny
building
part.
something?
My muse has a name too, actually, but it's been the same name, and I didn't come up with it. So it's actually Eowyn from Lord of the Rings.
Aw.
And when I was a little kid, that scene where she rips off her helmet and chops off the dragon's head and kills, the Lich King.
I used just
Uh,
the Lich King, I believe.
Yeah, so when that happens, and she cries out, that I am no man, for some reason, for a little dude, that totally just blew my mind. And ever since then, I've been writing strong women. So, I don't know, it's kind of my
We
thing.
thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
You went
Thank
for the
you.
hot badass.
Writing-
So,
Sure,
yeah,
I approve.
and ever since, and that's why. So, whenever I write, I don't know, she's somewhere back there, saying I am no,
Thanks for being a fan of AON over RON.
Okay, yeah, I totally loved Eowyn.
Why do they have to sound so similar?
because Tolkien.
Yeah, Tolkien. What can we say?
Because everybody does.
What I find interesting is what Brad was just saying, in a way, kind of hints, and also what Fedora was saying a moment ago, a while back at the beginning. It's almost like the Muse is external to you. They've given themselves names. In your case, Brad, it was a character from a book that's named that your Muse is taking the name of. For Fedora, good choice, but I have no idea how that got taken. But it's like a name itself, unlike Jamie, who named her Muse herself.
But
So
she still
it is a
sees it
Muse
as
separate.
something outside, though.
I had to give him a name because he was being such a punk. You know, you need something to yell when you're mad. You're like, Orion!
Yeah, I don't really yell at my Muse. I don't know. We have an understanding that on Sundays, you know, she gets the day off, and I never write on Sundays. But
Can your Muse talk to mine? Mine doesn't even know what the meaning of bedtime is.
Now, there is no editing Muse, so the editor in me will always be like, Sundays for editing.
No post on Sunday.
Well, I think editing's probably more of an analytical process, you know? Mm-hmm. So you can't inspiration your way through it.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, my inner critic deserves the name before my Muse does.
That would explain why I really
He's the one
like
who's bossing me around.
I'm pretty sure my inner critic is me.
The critic and the Muse have completely different jobs to me, because the Muse's entire job is to play and be fearless about, letting you explore.
Yes.
And the critic is the one that's supposed to be like, okay, that was great. We need to pull back over here, and that's completely irrelevant. Great, this is done.
So wait a minute. Do you consider your critic your editor then?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think an editor might be something different, at least for me. I have a problem. My Muse goes away and hides a lot. But my editor, unless I just finished something, is usually there to show me what's wrong with something. But that's not necessarily the critic saying this is bad. I mean, part of editing is saying, oh, this would be so much better if it was rearranged and this happened first. And, oh, there's this new scene here that you should add in. And that's creative. That's not just...
See, that's still my critic. Because that's my critic having a critical eye and looking at everything and very much identifying what needs to change and, knowing that. So that's kind of a process for me.
It's not that the Muse cannot say, oh, this would be cool over there instead. But...
Well, somebody has to think of the new paragraph.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the critic is sometimes that evil voice in my head going too, like, you're not good enough.
Yes.
This sucks, make it better. But, the Muse is always just there kind of going, do this, this will be cool, keep going. And then later you come back and you're like, yeah, this sucks.
Yes, Muses are very encouraging.
The Muse is the part that's alive, and then the critic's the one that's trying to bring it to the real world.
Well, not mine.
Okay.
No. Suetonius, who's been dead for almost 2,000 years, is pretty lively sometimes. And if I'm a good girl and I get up in the morning and write like I'm supposed to, everything goes along pretty well.
Is that every morning for you?
If I don't, it is every morning, except when I'm a bad girl. And then he kicks me in the slats and says, what are you doing, you lazy broad?
Okay, on that note then.
To that end, actually, I truly believe that if you show up every day, your Muse is going to show up every day.
That was
because,
what I was going to say.
That's
Can your
exactly,
Muse-
and that's totally what I believe.
Can your Muse have a talk with my Muse? Because he does not show up every day, regardless of what I do. I have to, grab him and tie him to a chair or something.
But
My
to do
Muse
that...
shows- Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but to do that, you have to be there to grab him and tie him to the chair. So I was wondering what you guys thought about, waiting for inspiration to strike versus having a writing habit.
Well, and tying my Muse to a chair, let's go back to death therapy reference before. Yes. But to be honest with you, with the writing discipline, I'm going to be the first one to tell you, yes, you've got to have a strong writing discipline, and it's a good idea to have a strong writing schedule. And I'm also the biggest breaker of that. Not that I used to be. Those who knew me long ago, I used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, write until I had to go to work, write at lunchtime, write when I came home, unless I was actually doing something. But life has taken one hell of a turn for the last almost 10 years, and I've lost a lot of that discipline. I've had to be reobtaining it. So discipline's very important. My process in writing, if you ever go to my webpage, it talks about CYMK, which, by the way, thank you, Jen, for giving me that definition.
It's the illustrator.
It's the illustrator.
What is CYMK?
CYMK is characters and storyboarding. Then Y is the screenplay, which I'm just really doing mostly dialogue and with very little description, just enough to tell me what's happening. Then I really work on that for a long time. Then the M is the manuscript, and the K is the final book. And the reason why, I've been developing this for the last almost 10 years, is outside of my writing life, my work and family aspects have really taken over a lot. And sadly, with my work, for example, I could start a novel in January, be working on it really hard for a few weeks, and then I'm not, because of everything I'm juggling, I can't touch it again until maybe September. So I've got 9 months to 10 months, depending on when in September this happens, or not to October, and I've lost what's going on. So I've got to be able to get the idea down real fast, not worry about the description so much, and then that way I can say, okay, I'm able to follow exactly what's happening here. I see what the characters really like, and I can go back and make sure things are really being character-driven and not plot-driven. So I went from being a pantser to a plotter, and it's been a painful transformation.
I have a question. Do the rest of you have idea notebooks?
Oh, yeah. I have an ID file, not necessarily a notebook.
Well, a
Yeah.
notebook, whatever. Yeah.
It's just a Word document. but-
Yeah.
I have that, and I have draft emails. I have like 92 draft emails right now in my Gmail because that's where I just dump ideas, and then when I, after a while, I dump them into a Word document.
I need to remember to do that because I do voice memos in the car because I hear writing while driving is not safe. So I'll record a voice memo and then email it to myself, and I then just leave it and don't pick it back up.
Well, Jenna, I know you have like that journal. Do you write ideas in there?
I write everything in there. All the journal is for catching stuff that doesn't fit in my head anymore. So I write in that. I have I have just stacks of college ruled notebooks from school that only got filled up a third of the way, and now I write in it with markers. Just constant stream of consciousness, plot, thoughts, ideas, characters, lines characters could say, charts on whether or not I should actually turn that man into a woman and vice versa, that kind of stuff. So I don't have, it's not like it's a book that's just for ideas, it's whatever is in arm's reach, so I make sure I always have something in arm's reach just in case I need it.
I know somebody who does similar to what you do, Kathleen, except for she actually records entire manuscripts while she's driving.
Wow.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah, I've attempted. I attempted that. That lasted a good maybe minute. However long it takes for me to get from my driveway down to the first stop sign.
And if you have really good diction and you need really good diction, I actually can use this software, and I don't have good enough diction to that. You can actually plug in your recording to voice recognition software and have it transcribe it for you. And it gets it about 95% right.
How far are you people
problem is
driving
that
that you drive this?
I had a good 20,
I was
30
gonna
minute drive
say
to
if
work.
I did this and let the Muse take over, I'd be in a car accident every other
Yeah.
day.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest, I actually have a file on my computer that I do, and I do it for, like, I'll come up with a nice story idea, and I'll just create a file for it, and I'll throw a bunch of ideas on it. It may get churned into something, it may not. I have a ton of them sitting on my computer. I also have several notebooks, just kind of like Jen does, and that's filled with all the ideas from when I was, 10 years old on up. And then I also have, like, for everything that I do, I have, like, notes jotted down on, I'm really bad about Post-it notes. So, and then I fold over the sticky part, so then it just turns into this little square piece of paper that can go anywhere. And I have literally a shoebox full of these.
Wow.
And they have random ideas thrown down on them. It might even be some random fact I heard on TV that would be really good in a book.
I need to stick all of mine in like a box. Thank you for
Boxes
that.
help.
And
I
you-
like
So
boxes.
lovely.
And then you
A
can have
steal.
like
No
a
box are better.
then you can
But I
have like a
notebooks
random.
that need to go in boxes.
Then when you want to write something new, you can just have I'm going to pull something random out
The
of the
random
hat.
story generator. I will admit to have doing that for short stories before.
That's a good idea. I'm more like Jamie in the sense of I will send emails to myself, and I like the emails because what I do is where I get some of my story ideas, it's straight out of newspapers, or I should say off of the websites for various news agencies, BBC, whatever, CNN, or some science ones like Red Orbit. And it's like, oh, this would be a good story idea. And I'll probably look at it later and go, what the hell was I thinking? But I'll say, okay, here's some of the use of the story. I'll jot some down in the email, and then I'll start pasting all the different links. And that way I can look at it later.
So it's like good though that you have like you feel like it's good to have that distance in between when you have it and then later when you come back to it and look at it again.
Sometimes it's good just to get straight on the page when you're thinking about it, which unfortunately doesn't happen in my life too often. A lot of times though, I like to think of it. I'm tossing in the back of my head like a percolator and letting my. If you've ever seen a percolator work, I mean the old style Not the modern day coffee pots, but the old style where the water shoots up, goes through the beans, goes back up, goes through the beans, and so
Maxwell
forth.
House.
Maxwell House. And just let it keep going and let it keep getting stronger and stronger of a story idea.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times, the longer I hold on to an idea, the more like stuff grows onto it, and then like it'll become, it's more interesting. It's like it's more complicated. It's better thought out. You know, it just grows over time. But there's also like you have to put it down at some point. You know.
No,
Yeah.
you see, you're putting it down all the way along there, and then you go back, 2 years later, and you're like, this is what I started with? Okay, this isn't recognizable to what I have now, but...
I think your subconscious needs time to kind of stew on it. Even if you're not actively thinking about it, it's kind of there in the background.
Stew.
Yes, stew.
Yes.
Delicious stew.
I went
There's
there.
a science fiction, I'm not science fiction, there's a mystery thriller writers conference that goes around, and it's also for fans. I call it the Comic-Con version for mystery and thrillers, but they don't dress up. It's called BoucherCon.
There's no fun in that.
Really?
Anyway, one of them,
This is a
actually that's
book.
one of the ways I met Fedora a while back. And when they had it here in 2011 in St. Louis, there was an author talking about one of his other authors, and I'm trying to remember who the heck was in the conversation. But they were saying that he always knew when he was working on a novel, because that man would do nothing but watch Jeopardy the entire time. He's watching Jeopardy, and in the back of his head, while he's not writing physically, in the back of his head, the story is going on. And he's getting down the ideas before he sits down and types it.
Well, I would say there's very little time that I am not thinking about my stories.
That's true.
I mean, any idea that I have, it'll be a month before I even start writing. I have to work through everything. I've got to think about all the characters I want to do. I've got to put it all into my head, and then I've got to kind of figure it all out. But even for the 3 months that I write the book, or the 6 to 9 months after that I'm really hardcore editing it, I to be honest, I don't think... I think about that story constantly, and then as a kind of favor to myself, I'll start thinking about other stuff, and that usually turns into my next book.
I don't know if you guys are similar to how I do things, but I have like 1,000,001 ideas, and I would say 90% of them are like 1 or 2 lines of, well, what if this happened, or a world where this is the rule. And then I would say like another 8 to 9% of them maybe come to fruition, somewhere between 1 and 10 pages of stuff where it's either characters or actual prose, and then I would say like 1% or less actually becomes something that's worth continuing on to a full novel. So I guess going back to a point you made, David, earlier was, where do you get your ideas? Well, where do I not get my ideas? I get them from everywhere, but the difference is most of them don't come to fruition.
So wait, if someone told you, I have this great idea for a story, you write it and we'll split everything 50-50.
Oh, God. That's actually
So wait,
happened.
you mean the ideas are not like the hard part? The actual writing is the hard part?
Yeah.
You have to work with them?
Kathleen, I love your sarcasm.
I hate the blank page. Like, seriously? I would much rather tear it apart and edit. Like,
See, there's
I like
a blank
editing.
page is filled with possibilities, though. I can do anything on a blank
Yeah,
page.
I'm with you on that. I
Well,
like
I
looking
like
at
editing
it, just
because
thinking.
then you can make it better.
And I like editing, too, but I've never been afraid of the blank page. There's just too much fun to put down on it.
Well,
And I have to
somebody-
say, too, like you were talking about, I actually, and like you were saying, I find characters first. So I generally think of my character, and then I start thinking about the horrible things I want to do to them.
Yeah. Because when you get to play the evil god.
And something nice
kind
that
of
I want
a-
to do for them.
It's kind of a difference in how you muse, though. Is that like you're starting with characters and you start with like a question.
yeah, I start with more plot, and somehow characters start forming into that world.
See, I start with the world. In fact, world building is my favorite part of it. And then I try and think of characters that become more and more real. So real people, if they grew up in this world, what would they be like? And then what would their problems be? And then I have to throw something in. And sometimes the plot comes up real easily, and sometimes it's, okay, I have all these characters, I have this world, what happens to them?
The mice quotient.
What?
There's one we're missing. I don't remember which one it is. Orson Scott Card's book on how to write science fiction and fantasy. He talks about 4 different ways that stories get started. And you guys have named 3 of the 4, and I'm trying to remember what the last one was. So, excuse me, I'm going to look
That's
it up.
because we're awesome.
That's what Google was invented for.
Well, I don't know that I have the 4th way that Mr. Card would have. However, I have a word that none of you have suggested yet. It is that somehow in my twisted brain, comes into my twisted brain, the black moment. And that's why I write mystery.
Okay.
Because there is a black moment that I have to somehow get to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the challenge for me.
I can see that. That's a fun way to write.
Yeah.
You're writing to the moment, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good way. I often do sometimes that with my the climactic event or the low point right before the climactic event. I'll write to that. I know what it is. The story will be kind of based, or not just solely around that, but I know it's out there, and I know I've got to get there.
That's me.
I think
All right.
Larry Nevin, is the type of author that, maybe this is the last one, maybe it isn't, for the types of science fiction, but he saw, the issues of the 70s when he was writing and imagined them to their, not a logical conclusion, not the logical conclusion. So, for instance, if you had, during the 70s, overpopulation was the big bugaboo. So he was thinking that...
It wasn't even that overpopulated.
Well, not yet.
Not
it was
yet.
in the future. But the
They had
idea...
no idea.
The idea is that at some point the world government was... there would be a world government, was going to have to institute what we would consider draconian population control methods. So he imagined a world that
So China.
had these methods.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, only in one of his books they were actually hunting down and killing pregnant women. But point is, it wasn't necessarily even...
Women can only carry like a few kids at a time at most.
Well, no, but that's the idea. They didn't
That's
have,
not fair.
they didn't have a permit to have a kid.
If they could have whole litters, though, then it would be okay.
Well, clearly, I'm in favor of
Women
girls
had eight.
not
What do you call
dying.
that?
I'm more for the Darwinian method. If you're too stupid to figure it out, then you don't deserve to.
See, I
So you're
would go
more in
for
favor
that,
of, like,
except
death
if anyone's
traps
seen the first
everywhere.
20 minutes of Idiocracy, that's not the way it works.
Oh,
So, unfortunately, the less brilliant people are going to
Yeah,
probably make the
reproducing
most.
is one of
already
those carnal
happening.
basic things that people do even without instruction.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's cells all over the planet that don't even have brains, and they can reproduce.
And all I'm going to say to this is it's already happening. Hey, as a certain mime I've seen, I know Jamie saw as well. Science fiction is for those, reality shows are for those who can't handle science fiction. Reality shows, enough said.
And apparently we've now moved into conspiracy theory radio.
We have
About the
kind of
mice
gone off
quotient.
topic here.
about the mice quotient, you actually did, Fedora, hit the last one. Yes, the 4, milieu, or location, which was yours. Idea, character, and event. You just said event. So, yay, all 4.
Do we turn into Captain Planet now? Or?
No, we need heart and a consolation monkey first.
Well, I might be the only one at the
Capuchin.
table who uses art. I know I'm not the only one because I know several of us have resource files full of pictures to help them build their world and illustrate their characters. But
Yes.
as an illustrator in my all-the-time job, I tend to draw pictures of characters and scenes I'm getting ready to work on to get me in the mood or to muse on when I'm not working. So, like, for example, when I would go to a coffee shop or whatever, I leave whatever I was doing and I sit down, I set everything up, I usually draw a picture on a napkin first. A picture of my character in the scene that I'm getting ready to draw, and that'll get me into the world. So, I guess, can art be a muse?
I think so.
Definitely.
I do
Most
that.
definitely.
I do that
Anything.
if I could draw, but I draw epic stick figures. That's about it. I think that's why I write is because I get these very visual, almost movie-like images in my head, and I can't draw, so they have to come out some way.
Every book I'm writing is a movie in my head.
Yep.
Not to mention, I know Dave's like this. I have thousands of image files that I switch out as backgrounds or will use as, slideshows or something.
Yep.
Literally for inspiration.
Yep.
Yeah, I like listening to I have this whole selection of ambient kind of music where it doesn't have lyrics or anything. It's just very long and kind of noisy. And I use those for whatever particular mood I want, And
I used to do that.
That can help. a
Now
little.
I write or I listen to music that's faster, anything above 130 beats or so that my fingers start moving faster. I find I type way, way faster listening to house music or something like that. Something crazy and just out there. Yeah, it's been kind of crazy. Because I used to be just like you. I have a whole stack of CDs from movies that we probably all know well their scores. But
Yes. Actually, and like you, what I do is with my music, I listen to movie themes, or not movie themes, but movie soundtracks. But I even listen to soundtracks up for movies never made yet. Just throw out a couple of bands real fast, or groups real quick. 2 Steps from Hell, Immediate Music, Midnight Syndicate.
Explosions in the sky.
There we go. And what they do is a lot of these groups will have their music show up on theme trailers, if you will. But they've come out with CDs that are made for music for movies never made. Midnight Syndicate, if I'm going to write a horror, I've got my Midnight Syndicate on because that's all horror-related music.
So I think it's interesting that it seems like you write stuff without lyrics, correct? Mm-hmm. So I tend to too, because I know if I was listening to stuff with lyrics that I would start writing those lyrics as opposed to writing my book. Mm-hmm. And I find it distracting. So either I'd be writing those lyrics or I'd be listening to that and not writing. But I think music with lyrics does also inspire me. I'll be driving in a car and hear a song on the radio, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's this scene in my book. It's describing that, which is why I think a lot of authors post playlists, what songs they listened to or what inspired them when they were writing, which I think is really fun to see, what an author used as kind of as their muse almost when they were writing. And then you can go back and kind of see if you can figure out what scene or what part of the book fits with what piece of music that they picked.
See, I listen to audiobooks that I've already listened to before. So it's the voices in the background.
The soothing sound of a human voice?
I guess so.
These are all the white noises that everyone uses, it sounds like, when they're writing, so that they can tune things out that they're not trying to focus on, like, not the story.
And
I think that's kind of it. If the audiobook is there, if I lose my train of thought, I listen to the audiobook instead of my mind going off into a third story, that I'm making up in my head.
What is more perfect white noise than white noise? I mean, just the noise of the house creaking and traffic on the street outside. I can't abide to have music on because I get into it, I start dancing around and totally forget what I'm writing.
My brain was built for distractibility.
Yeah.
I need something that I'm like, oh, I'm focused on this thing, so I don't have to pay attention to anything else.
I also can't write in front of windows. Can never write in front of a window. I stare out the window too much.
See, I can't write at home at all. There's no chance.
And that's why you're at Caldy's all the time.
That's why I go to a coffee
fabulous
shop.
place. Yeah,
Actually,
I write
multiple
best,
coffee shops.
I write best at coffee shops and in airports.
I actually write best at home.
And on airplanes and trains.
I actually write best at home, but I think it's because I live alone and I can,
Yeah.
other than my dog, I can control the noise factor.
This is why I like writing best after midnight.
Yeah, when I write at
No
home,
distractions.
I attempt to write at home, since I take care of an elderly parent, half my brain is listening for them to say God knows what. And so my mind is really distracted in a bad way.
Jamie, you had mentioned ideas in the car and lyrics and everything. And Jen, you had mentioned being inspired by art. And I think that brings me back to the whole inspiration versus the muse as something external. It seems like people's muses are changing, but I'm not sure if those are necessarily the muse because Jamie, yours is named. So, like, how does the inspiration work with the muse? And do you, I've heard some people have different ones.
I think it comes hand in hand. I mean, I think, you get the inspiration and then it just, I don't know, it kind of morphs into and becomes this one giant glob of junk that just kind of, like I said, it's like a hostile takeover. It just, it becomes this giant glob that is rooted in your brain and it just keeps expanding and, oh, now we're going to do this, and now we're going to do this, and oh, you're going to write
Sounds like
this.
a possible alien movie.
I think I need to show the muse I don't care about it sometimes. So the reason why I started the cookbook is because the fantasy novel wasn't going well. The reason why I started the fantasy novel is because I needed to take a break from the sci-fi novel. But the point is, when I started on the cooking book, then all of a sudden, I was back to writing the fantasy novel.
Do you think part of that is because maybe your mind was too much in one direction and you needed to play more?
I think I need to give myself time to work things out in the back of my head. Now, this is the fantasy novel. I'm a plotter. I'm a serious plotter.
Oh, yeah.
I know what happens 100 years into the future in my stories, in general.
That never stays true for me.
Yeah, the trouble is, this fantasy book is supposed to be my attempt at seat of the pants, which, by the way, is failing. But it's more seat of the pants than anything I've ever done. But because of that, I think I am plotting in my head. So I think I need a break every so often so I can figure out what's supposed to be happening.
And on a sidebar with that, then I think Jamie wants to say something real quick. One thing, okay, she shakes her head no. The one thing's off of the muse for a second. I'm going to sidebar to this for just a second.
Oh my goodness.
I know, amazing how that happens. Anyway,
Weren't we on the side? How many sidebars are we on?
I can get enough sidebars to fill up the entire ocean. But
It's the
anyway,
Muse's fault. They keep inspiring us to go off to the
Exactly.
side.
exactly.
For those of you listening, you could turn this into a drinking bar, drinking game.
Drinking game, yeah.
Go to a bar and
just
turn
a
it into
bar.
a drinking
Yeah, just drinking bar. But I know I can speak for a lot of us. We get approached by brand new writers and they say, I've written a book and I want to get it done. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I've gone through at least 10 to 12 practice novels, kind of like what Melanie was hinting at there, is, hey, this is one I'm going to write as a pantser. I've written about a good dozen practice ones before I even attempt to go out with a real one. I don't know.
I don't want to be a jerk, but I had one novel that I think I was just playing with characters and symbolism and all kind, every possible thing that you could imagine when you're writing, and then, I never finished it, and then I kind of went out and started, and then I wrote a book and I finished it and started working on that. But I think I haven't played as much as you have, but in that respect, I think every time I sit down to write a book, the process is completely different.
Yeah.
The first novel I finished, very much to the outline. The second one I outlined, but it was like, what was supposed to happen in chapter 5 ended up happening in chapter 12, and what was supposed to happen in chapter 10 got moved forward to chapter 3, and it didn't want to bend to my will, so.
And that's why now I do the storyboarding ideas, because I will go through the storyboard and then I look back and go, okay, wait a minute, this is not how it's working, and move things around. It's easy to tear apart and put back together.
Well, going back to what Kathleen was saying, in terms of inspiration versus the muse, okay, I can pull inspiration from anywhere, from a song, from art, from a bird flying across the sky. You never know. But the muse is what, when I sit down and I want to take all those ideas and I want to put them on the page, well, she's the one right there who's helping me do that. And so inspiration isn't coming when I sit in front of the page. The words might, or something like that. That's inspiring. But everything that inspired what I'm about to sit down and do, that could come from anywhere. But my muse is the one who's, actually getting the fingers going.
The funnel through which everything goes.
Exactly.
And going back to the music statement earlier, sometimes I'm listening to the music not to get inspiration or for white noise, but sometimes it's like tossing on a aerobics tape, saying to my muse, get your butt in gear.
Well, I think that's why, at least when I sit down to write, I sit down and I look at what I wrote the time before, and I think that puts me back in the scene and brings the muse back to the forefront, and it helps everything just gel and flow as I go into.
So, tying up with the muse then, what really do we even know what a muse is, or what our muse is out of all this? Because obviously no one writer has the same
Tangibly,
thing muse.
I don't know what it is. Is it something out there in the greater universe? Is the greater universe? Is it stars singing, in their wavelengths that I just happen to pick up and call a muse?
It's the voices in your head, but you're not crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're the voice in my head, but,
Yeah, I don't believe that it's a Grecian god that's shanghaiing my brain and making me do things.
No.
I believe it's a part of me that's growing up out of what's inside me and what has built me in all these years I've been alive.
Yeah,
like
is it
those
my
things.
subconscious?
Yeah, I mean all those experiences and just the stuff that I like seeing in other movies and books and songs. Those things are what make me want to write, because I want to put all the good feelings I get from the world around me and the media I consume all into one place so I can enjoy it and so other people can enjoy it. So the muse is a part of me, I guess that's what I'm thinking. Is that we talk about it. Talk
Creating
about it
the
being
words for you that you then call a muse.
well, it's almost even deeper than that. Subconscious. If you're, it's like it's in your soul. It's part of the Play-Doh that makes you up.
It's in your soul, it's in your head, it's in your emotions, it's in so many different pieces of you.
Well, it is pieces of you, but I'm curious about how much we externalize, going back to the Greeks and the Romans, and how they saw the muse as something outside of themselves, through which, the muse was outside of themselves and would use them as a conduit to tell whatever story it was.
Well,
Does it help to externalize for you guys, or?
Yeah, I kind of like looking at it that way, just because it makes the stories and ideas that come to you feel a little more sacred. I think how we tend to approach it as writing people is analytically, and we tend to look at the mechanics and all that, but that's not how people read it. How people read it is holistically. And I think it helps to kind of keep that perspective of the idea of the story as a sacred whole, as some kind of soul to it. So you don't mess with it too much, with the analysis, with the reason.
See, I don't like the idea of considering writing sacred because you're not supposed to, tear up and rewrite sacred works here.
Oh,
Yeah, but I mean, just to
I don't
keep
know.
the
I'm
heart
still
of it.
thinking that
You're trying to get the sacred idea to be more
Back in the day,
accurate
they
to
were-
what it should be, though.
getting a new stone and starting again.
I think I'm going to let Fedora bring us to an end. Then I'm going to make one statement that I think takes what you guys are saying and apply it.
well, I would just like to say that writing is an act of supreme arrogance.
And
We have
insanity.
the idea that we can write something that other people would not only want to read, but would somehow benefit from or enjoy. That is an act of supreme arrogance. And for
yes.
me, I think the Muse gives me permission to be arrogant.
I like that.
I like that idea.
It gives you permission to have a voice.
Going back with what Matt was kind of indicating, and we've all said this, you've got the mechanics of writing, and you've got the muse. I can sit down, as all of us can, and take a bunch of students and say, this is how you put together a story. We can teach the mechanics of the storytelling, but it's that organic aspect of the muse that's within inside of us that actually breathes the life of the story into it. And with that, I'm going to close our first episode of The Right Pack.
Yay!
Come back next week as we continue more talks on writing. Theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is a online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
I am David Allen Lucas, your host for Right Pack Radio. I am an author of science fiction, mystery, horror, and poetry. With me today is...
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits. I have out a book now, Jack the Ripper in St. Louis. It takes you back to 1897 St. Louis, a place where the real Jack the Ripper may have died in 1903.
I'm Jennifer Stolzer. I write YA fantasy, and I illustrate children's books and anything else.
I'm Matt McGraw. I'm an amateur prose writer mostly, although I did some screenwriting in college. Currently, I'm working on a book with Jennifer here called Patrick the Spider, a picture book.
I'm Jamie Quakeover. I write middle grade and young adult science fiction and fantasy, and yes, I really am a rocket scientist.
I'm Brad Cook, author, publisher of Blank Slate Press, and president of St. Louis Writers Guild.
I'm Melanie Colaney. I write science fiction and fantasy, and for some reason I just started a cookbook, and I also have a day job working as a research scientist.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Kayembe. I write under a pen name, LGBT fiction, and paranormal romance, and urban fantasy, and I think magic is the coolest thing ever.
And speaking of magic, today's topic is the Muse. Yes, that insane thing that seems to drive all of us writers, completely off the edge. It has known to drive some writers to drink. Other ones, we just go straight to the page and start writing. I don't know about anybody else here at the Right Pack, but I know when I get approached, hey, where do you get your ideas from? My real response, though I don't say it, is I have no clue where a lot of these things come from. In ancient days, the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans believed that the muse was actually an entity or a deity unto itself that talked to the artist. And what over the centuries that has changed. Where do you get your muses from?
I was going to say, with relation to the Greeks and Romans, Elizabeth Gilbert has a TED Talk about creativity that will tell you more about the things that you just outlined.
Excellent.
Well, you know, Dave, when you said the word muse, I said to myself, I don't have a muse. Everything comes from the old being right up here. But then, you know, I thought about it, and something told me, yeah, maybe you do have a muse somewhere. And where is it? And how do I know that I had one? It's because of writing Jack the Ripper in St. Louis. It's set in a newspaper office, so of course there had to be a chief editor. And I had absolutely no trouble finding the name for this chief editor because, you know, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have categories of names. And I try to find one that matches in meaning and sound. And I have a lot of trouble with that. It can take me days to think of a name. But this one came to me just like that. And it's Suetonius Ham.
That came to you like
it
that?
did.
Wow.
Just like that. Suetonius. But, you know, even though I had 2 years of high school Latin, I had no idea who Suetonius was, so I had to look him up. And it turns out that he was absolutely perfect. He was a librarian. He was a writer. He wrote books about children's games and pop culture in ancient Rome. And he wrote books about famous whores. Now, let me tell you, it doesn't get much better than that. And so that's why my muse is Suetonius.
And it's a perfect symbolism in your story considering Jack the Ripper went around killing whores.
Oh, you're so right.
So have you looked him up, and do you have a library of Suetonius works now?
Well, now, if you want me to go into the lives of the famous Caesars, which is, by the way, how we know about the Caesars, because he wrote everything down for 14 Caesars. But he also wrote about poets, and he wrote about grammarians and speakers, and he was just an all-around great guy. But it would take me many volumes to tell you anything about, say, Julius, Augustus, Titus, Nero, and Caligula. I could go on for hours about just those two.
They were kind of crazy.
Kind of crazy? Oh my
Aren't
God.
we all kind of crazy?
Yeah,
I
but
listen to the voices in our head.
we don't burn down cities and play violins, though. We just write about all the people burning in the cities.
I've burned down cities before.
No. The violin was not
Not the
invented.
violin, but like
It was a liar.
There we go.
And Suetonius was the one who wrote down that it was a liar.
He's officially my favorite person ever right now.
And just while we're talking about Suetonius, before we get back to the Muse, I don't know if anyone has ever read Robert Graves' I, Claudius and Claudius the God.
No.
But a lot
Based
of
on Suetonius.
Yes. Okay.
Suetonius is still a super rad name.
It is.
I love it.
Super.
Super rad. Hey, do I get a turn?
No.
Go
Are
for
we
it.
going around? All right.
Where?
What? You're just gonna take it out of my hand?
It's-
I didn't
go
think
for it.
it. Well, just go.
Yeah, okay, fine. All right, well, my
bring my own
muse,
mic.
I tend to craft my own muses when I'm writing a story. I usually start with the ending. Like, I paint a scene, and in that scene, I think about who's in there and how they're acting, and the rest of the book is kind of written to make that scene, like, powerful. So, like, my main character is often my muse, because I want to make sure that his or her conclusion is going to be, like, punch. Or in my current novel, the supporting character is a muse because he is my lead character's motivation. So they come to life inside me, and they drive me to continue.
It's
Do you have
interesting that
trouble
you,
with the names?
I don't have trouble with the names, no, they're all puns. Thank you, though. I know who to come to since you find these gems of names.
you do the exact opposite. You know, you start with the ending scene. My problem with a lot of my stories is that I kind of write this fiction like it's a history. So the idea is develop their entire lives and then tell a portion of it. But their lives go on. And even if the main character dies, there are other people around. So I just continue on with the story of their lives. So there's not really a definite ending.
All right, well, I'm killing all the things and not on paper. On that note, it sounds like we're getting into writing strategies and our process. And I wanted to know if you guys are separating the muse from inspiration, because for me, often something will inspire me to start writing, but it won't necessarily be what keeps me writing later. It might be cut out entirely.
Well, let me throw right in there. Thank you. You actually gave me a perfect segue to describe how my muse works. And the reason I did that is my muse I figured out only the other day. how this thing actually worked. And the only way to really explain it, I always thought, maybe I'm always trying to be too precise with what I'm doing and so forth. No. I've actually got two aspects. And if you've ever seen the movie, What About Bob, you will understand how my muse works. And if you have not seen it, 1989, go look it up. Richard Dreyfuss and Bill Murray. Bill Murray is a character who has every psychosis possible. And Richard Dreyfuss is a psychologist who's going to be interviewed by Good Morning America. And he's very precise. He's got everything in order, clean house type thing. Well, the clean house type thing is me. And my muse turns out to be Bill Murray, who just jumps in there, starts wearing the guy's pajamas, sleeping, not sexually, but sleeping with the family. He invites himself.
And we went
Not
there.
sexually.
We weren't gonna do that before.
Yeah.
so
He doesn't-
we don't have a
yeah.
choice.
Bob doesn't see people like that.
Yeah, Bob doesn't see people like that.
He keeps his pajamas on.
Yeah, he keeps his pajamas on. And Richard Dreyfuss' character literally ties him up, puts, if I remember right, gasoline and I think maybe even dynamite around him to knock the character off, and the explosion does not happen. I'm sorry, spoiler
Spoiler
alert.
alert, jeez.
But
This is
Bill
not-
Murray believes that he's been cured of all his psychosis by death therapy. This is the way my muse and I work. Complete insanity.
Yeah, I would say that too, but in response to Kathleen's question, it all kind of comes at me like a Mack truck all at once. Because I write a lot of science fiction, I am constantly asking what if, and I'll just see something and then all of a sudden I'll go, well, what if this? And then the next thing I know, there's all these characters coming at me in my head, and, it doesn't matter where I am, all of a sudden I'm writing something and it just takes over my body, and it's like I got struck by an arrow. So that's why I named my muse Orion. Because
You named your muse.
I named my
Wow.
muse. His
That's
name
adorable.
is Orion. And he's a little pain in the butt sometimes.
Is the galaxy on his belts?
He does. Well, and I had to go to the science fiction end. I mean, constellations, you can't get more science than that. So
She is a rocket scientist.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So he shoots me with arrows, and oftentimes at the most inconvenient possible time, like when I'm driving, when I'm in the shower, any place you can't have a pencil or a computer. So yeah.
Yeah.
Actually-
you tend to do that.
I feel kind of a kinship with that. Although how I think of it isn't quite as pretty. I always kind of likened it to like vomiting almost.
Wow.
Like how I look at it is, first I have to go around and I have to eat up like ideas from various areas that aren't necessarily connected.
Okay.
And
I follow.
you have to. I go around, eat them, and they go down, and they digest for a while, and they sort of turn to a nice little slurry mess together. And then suddenly, I'll just be sitting around with a blank page in front of me, just. Well, that's the good. That's the good ones. The worst is when it's like a dry
That's the
heat
good one.
kind of thing. Where it's like I'm trying to get it going, and it's just like, and it's not going.
I'm getting that Mean Girls vibe over here, the whole word vomit thing.
Yeah,
No,
the
wait,
little
real
word
vomit.
So it would be more like the vomitorium, I guess, would be the Roman thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Oh my
I
goodness.
I see it as like an organic process, and so I try not to.
Yeah, it's very natural.
So should we call libraries vomitoriums now? Because that's kind of what
Let's
they
not.
are.
Not really. I think we want more kids to
Is that
read.
why Alexandria burned down? Is
No,
that
we
why
could
that
call-
library went?
I think
they
it's more
called it the
accurate to say
vomitorium,
that
didn't they?
school is a vomitorium, because that's where the writing
I was
happens
gonna
mostly.
say, I don't know that.
Because,
vomit
it's
burns,
more
but-
like the library would be just a bucket of other people's vomit.
Yes.
There's no actual vomiting going on in the library. It's just where you store everybody else's.
So it's more like a what is
It's
it?
a
Like a
toilet.
septic tank.
Well, here's my question with that. Schools have now been classified as killing creativity.
Yes.
Mostly because they're doing tests that are being required by some MBA who's translated some law into some way. And it makes absolutely no sense. So the kids are vomiting back really what they're being tested on. So
They're
No, that's the
vomiting
problem. They're vomiting
they're
other
given.
people's vomit. They just get
Exactly.
the vomit right in, and then it goes
I'm
right
gonna
back
be
out.
ill if we
So let's get back to the muse. Sorry, I did that.
So you, Matt, had said vomiting. I had heard it explained, I think by Madeline Lingle, as stew. And because
No, it's just the vomit then.
Yeah.
there's a lot of
I don't think you can
percolation.
keep
So
down
We're
with
not
that
getting
and-
lunch after
and not,
this.
yeah.
oh my goodness.
It's much
I
nicer.
can't do food references right now.
I
It's
think
not
it's
going to work
more
after
like
the
a-
vomit conversation.
Because you collect things from all kinds of areas, and you have 50
equate it
different
to
things
building
you're
a
doing.
building. You know,
I think
you've
are
got
you
blocks
building
and
50
pieces
at the
that are
same
going
time?
up. You can.
If you're a contractor.
That's called, putting up condos or something. But can we do something besides food references?
I think it's more like a
Building
hostile
condos with the
takeover.
mines.
Like, a hostile takeover. It just
Well,
like,
Brad,
you're
what's your
forced
muse
to put
like?
the-
Is your
Well, see,
muse
that's the
like
funny
building
part.
something?
My muse has a name too, actually, but it's been the same name, and I didn't come up with it. So it's actually Eowyn from Lord of the Rings.
Aw.
And when I was a little kid, that scene where she rips off her helmet and chops off the dragon's head and kills, the Lich King.
I've used just
Uh,
the Lich King, I believe.
Yeah, so when that happens, and she cries out, that I am no man, for some reason, for a little dude, that totally just blew my mind. And ever since then, I've been writing strong women. So, I don't know, it's kind of my
We
thing.
thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
You went
Thank
for the
you.
hot badass.
Writing
So, yeah,
I approve.
and ever since, and that's why. So, whenever I write, I don't know, she's somewhere back there, saying I am no,
Thanks for
man.
bean a fan of Aowen over Arwen.
Okay, yeah, I totally loved Eowyn.
Why do they have to sound so similar?
Because Tolkien.
That's Tolkien. What can we say?
Because everybody does.
What I find interesting is what Brad was just saying, in a way, kind of hints, and also what Fedora was saying a moment ago, a while back at the beginning. It's almost like the muse is external to you. They've given themselves names. In your case, Brad, it was a character from a book that's named that your muse is taking the name of. For Fedora, good choice, but I have no idea how that got taken. But it's like a name itself, unlike Jamie, who named her muse herself.
But
So
she still
it is a
sees it
muse
as
separate.
something outside, though.
I had to give him a name because he was being such a punk. You need something to yell when you're mad. You're like, Orion!
Yeah, I don't really yell at my muse. I don't know. We have an understanding that on Sundays, she gets the day off, and I never write on Sundays. But
Can your muse talk to mine? Mine doesn't even know what the meaning of bedtime means.
now there is no editing muse, so the editor in me will always be like Sundays for editing.
No post on Sunday.
Well, I think editing's probably more of an analytical process, Mm-hmm. So you can't inspiration your way through it.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, my inner
different
critic
processes.
deserves the name before my muse does.
That would explain why I really
He's the one
like
who's
it.
bossing me
Nah,
around.
I'm pretty sure my inner critic is me.
The critic and the muse have completely different jobs to me, because one is the muse's entire job is to play and be fearless about letting you explore.
Yes.
And the critic is the one that's supposed to be like, okay, that was great. We need to pull back over here, and that's completely irrelevant. Great, this is done.
So wait a minute. Do you consider your critic your editor then?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think an editor might be something different, at least for me. I have a problem. My muse goes away and hides a lot. But my editor, unless I just finished something, is usually there to show me what's wrong with something. But that's not necessarily the critic saying this is bad. I mean, part of editing is saying, oh, this would be so much better if it was rearranged and this happened first. And oh, there's this new scene here that you should add in. And that's creative. That's not just...
See, that's still my critic, because that's my
Yeah.
critic having a critical eye and looking at everything and very much identifying what needs to change and knowing that. So that's kind of a process for me.
It's not that the muse cannot say, oh, this would be cool over there instead. But
Well, somebody has to think of the new paragraph.
yeah.
Well, for me, the critic is sometimes that evil voice in my head going to, like, you're not good enough.
Yes.
This sucks, make it better. But, the muse is always just there kind of going, do this, this will be cool, keep going. And then later you come back and you're like, yeah, this sucks.
Yes, muses
Yeah.
are very encouraging.
The muse is the part that's alive, and then the critic's the one that's trying to bring it to the real world.
Well, not mine.
Okay.
No. Suetonius, who's been dead for almost 2,000 years, is pretty lively sometimes. And if I'm a good girl and I get up in the morning and write like I'm supposed to, everything goes along pretty well.
Is that
if
every morning
I
for you?
don't, it is every
Okay.
morning, except when I'm a bad girl. And then he kicks me in the slats and says, "What are you doing, you lazy broad?"
Okay, on
Now,
that
see,
note
well,
then.
to that end, actually, I truly believe that if you show up every day, your muse is going to show up every day.
That was
Because,
what I was going to say.
that's
Can your
exactly, and
muse-
that's totally what I believe.
Can your muse have a talk with my muse? Because he does not show up every day, regardless of what I do. I have to, grab him and tie him to a chair or something.
But
My
to do
muse shows
that,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but to do that, you have to be there to grab him and tie him to the chair. So I was wondering what you guys thought about, waiting for inspiration to strike versus having a writing habit.
Well, and tying my muse to a chair, let's go back to death therapy reference before. Yes. But to be honest with you, with the writing discipline, I'm going to be the first one to tell you, yes, you've got to have a strong writing discipline, and it's a good idea to have a strong writing schedule. And I'm also the biggest breaker of that. Not that I used to be. Those who knew me long ago, I used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, write until I had to go to work, write at lunchtime, write when I came home, unless I was actually doing something. But life has taken one hell of a turn for the last almost 10 years, and I've lost a lot of that discipline. I've had to be reobtaining it. So discipline is very important. My process in writing, if you ever go to my webpage, it talks about CYMK, which, by the way, thank you, Jen, for giving me that definition.
It's the illustrator.
It's the illustrator.
What is CYMK?
CYMK is characters and storyboarding. Then Y is the screenplay, which I'm just really doing mostly dialogue and with very little description, just enough to tell me what's happening. Then I really work on that for a long time. Then the M is the manuscript, and the K is the final book. And the reason why, and I've been developing this for the last almost 10 years, is outside of my writing life, my work and family aspects have really taken over a lot. And sadly, with my work, for example, I could start a novel in January, be working on it really hard for a few weeks, and then because of everything I'm juggling, I can't touch it again until maybe September. So I've got 9 months to 10 months, depending on when in September this happened, or not to October, and I've lost what's going on. So I've got to be able to get the idea down real fast, not worry about the description so much, and then that way I can say, okay, I'm able to follow exactly what's happening here. I see what the characters really like, and I can go back and make sure things are really being character-driven and not plot-driven. So I went from being a pantser to a plotter, and it's been a painful transformation.
I have a question. Do the rest of you have idea notebooks?
Oh, yeah. I have an idea file, not necessarily a notebook.
Well,
Yeah.
notebook, whatever. Yeah.
It's just a Word document. But
Yeah.
I have that, and I have draft emails. I have like 92 draft emails right now in my Gmail. Because that's where I just dump ideas, and then when after a while, I dump them into a Word document.
I need to remember to do that because I do voice memos in the car because I hear writing while driving is not safe. So I'll record a voice memo and then email it to myself, and I then just leave it and don't pick it back up.
Well, Jenna, I know you have like that journal. Do you write ideas in there?
I write everything in there. All the journal is for catching stuff that doesn't fit in my head anymore. So I write in that. I have I have just stacks of college ruled notebooks from school that only got filled up a third of the way, and now I write in it with markers. Just constant stream of consciousness, plot, thoughts, ideas, characters, lines characters could say, charts on whether or not I should actually turn that man into a woman and vice versa, that kind of stuff. So I don't have, it's not like it's a book that's just for ideas, it's whatever is in arm's reach, so I make sure I always have something in arm's reach just in case I need it.
I know somebody who does similar to what you do, Kathleen, except for she actually records entire manuscripts while she's driving.
Wow.
I couldn't do that.
I've attempted. I attempted that. That lasted a good maybe minute. However long it takes for me to get from my driveway down to the first stop sign.
And if you have really good diction and you need really good diction, I actually can use this software, and I don't have good enough diction to that. You can actually plug in your recording to voice recognition software and have it transcribe it for you. And it gets it about 95% right.
How far are you people driving?
that
That you listen to this?
I got a good 20,
I
30
was
minute
gonna
drive
say,
to
if
work.
I did this and let the Muse take over, I'd be in a car accident every other day.
No
Because
kidding.
they're just, yeah.
Now, to be honest, I actually have a file on my computer that I do, and I do it for, I'll come up with a story idea, and I'll just create a file for it, and I'll throw a bunch of ideas on it. It may get turned into something, it may not. I have a ton of them sitting on my computer. I also have several notebooks, just kind of like Jen does, and that's filled with all the ideas from when I was, 10 years old on up. And then I also have, for everything that I do, I have notes jotted down on. I'm really bad about Post-it notes. So and then I fold over the sticky part, so then it just turns into this little square piece of paper that can go anywhere. And I have literally a shoebox full of these.
Wow.
And they have random ideas thrown down on them. It might even be some random fact I heard on TV that would be really good in a book.
I need to stick all of mine in like a box. Thank you for
Boxes
that.
help. I
And
don't
you-
like
They're
boxes.
lovely.
And then you
A
can have
steel.
like
No
a
box are better.
then you
Yeah.
can
But I
have like a
notebooks
random.
that need to go in boxes.
Then when you want to write something new, you can just have I'm going to pull something random out
The
of
random
hat.
story generator. I will admit to have done doing that for short stories before.
That's a good idea. I'm more like Jamie in the sense of I will send emails to myself, and I like the emails because what I do is where I get some of my story ideas is straight out of newspapers, or I should say off of the websites for various news agencies, BBC, whatever, CNN, or some science ones like Red Orbit. And it's like, oh, this would be a good story idea. And I'll probably look at it later and go, what the hell was I thinking? But I'll say, okay, here's some of the use of the story. I'll jot some down in the email, and then I'll start pasting all the different links. And that way I can look at it later.
So it's like good though that you have you feel like it's good to have that distance in between when you have it and then later when you come back to it and look at it again.
Sometimes it's good just to give straight on the page when you're thinking about it, which unfortunately doesn't happen in my life too often. A lot of times though, I like to think of it. I'm tossing in the back of my head like a percolator and letting my. If you've ever seen a percolator work, I mean the old style. Not the modern day coffee pots, but the old style where the water shoots up, goes through the beans, goes back up, goes through the beans, and so
Maxwell
forth.
House.
Maxwell House. And just let it keep going and let it keep getting stronger and stronger of a story idea.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times the longer I hold on to an idea, the more like stuff grows onto it, and then like it'll become it's more interesting. It's like it's more complicated. It's better thought out. It just grows over time. But there's also like you have to put it down at some point.
No,
Yeah.
you see, you're putting it down all the way along there, and then you go back, 2 years later, and you're like, this is what I started with? Okay, this isn't
yeah.
recognizable to what I have now, but...
I think your subconscious needs time to kind of stew on it, even if you're not actively thinking about it. It's kind of there in the background.
Stew.
Yes, dude.
Yes.
Delicious stew.
I went
There's
there.
a science fiction, I'm not science fiction, there's a mystery thriller writers conference that goes around, and it's also for fans. I call it the Comic-Con version for mystery and thrillers, but they don't dress up. It's called BoucherCon.
There's no fun in that.
Really?
Anyway, one of them,
This is
actually
a
that's
book.
one of the ways I met Fedora a while back. And when they had it here in 2011 in St. Louis, there was an author talking about one of his other authors, and I'm trying to remember who the heck was in the conversation. But they were saying that he always knew when he was working on a novel, because that man would do nothing but watch Jeopardy the entire time. He's watching Jeopardy, and in the back of his head, while he's not writing physically, in the back of his head, the story is going on. And he's getting down the ideas before he sits down and types it.
Well, I would say there's very little time that I am not thinking about my stories.
That's true.
I mean, any idea that I have, it'll be a month before I even start writing. I have to work through everything. I've got to think about all the characters I want to do. I've got to put it all into my head, and then I've got to kind of figure it all out. But even for the 3 months that I write the book, or the 6 to 9 months after that I'm really hardcore editing it, I to be honest, I don't think... I think about that story constantly, and then as a kind of favor to myself, I'll start thinking about other stuff, and that usually turns into my next book.
I don't know if you guys are similar to how I do things, but I have like 1,000,001 ideas, and I would say 90% of them are like 1 or 2 lines of, well, what if this happened, or a world where this is the rule. And then I would say like another 8 to 9% of them maybe come to fruition, somewhere between 1 and 10 pages of stuff where it's either characters or actual prose, and then I would say like 1% or less actually becomes something that's worth continuing on to a full novel. So I guess going back to a point you made, David, earlier was, where do you get your ideas? Well, where do I not get my ideas? I get them from everywhere, but the difference is most of them don't come to fruition.
So wait, if someone told you, I have this great idea for a story, you write it and we'll split everything 50-50.
Oh, God. That's actually happened.
You mean the ideas are not like the hard part? The actual writing is the hard part?
Yeah.
You have to work
Absolutely.
with them?
I hate
Kathleen, I love your sarcasm.
I hate the blank page. Like, seriously? I would much rather tear it apart and edit. Like,
See, there's
I like
a blank
editing.
page is filled with possibilities, though. I can do anything on a blank.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like
I
looking
like
at
editing
it, just
because
thinking.
then you can make it better.
And I like editing too, but I've never been afraid of the blank page. There's just too much fun to put down on it.
Well,
And I have to
somebody-
say too, like you were talking about, I actually, and like you were saying, I find characters first. So I generally think of my character, and then I start thinking about the horrible things I want to do to them.
Yeah. Because when you get to play the evil god.
And something nice
kind
that
of
I
the-
want to do for them.
It's kind of a difference in how you muse, though. Is that like you're starting with characters and you start with like a question.
yeah, I start with more plot, and somehow characters start forming into that world.
See, I start with the world. In fact, that's world building is my favorite part of it. And then I try and think of characters that become more and more real. So real people, if they grew up in this world, what would they be like? And then what would their problems be? And then I have to throw something in. Sometimes the plot comes up real easily, and sometimes it's, okay, I have all these characters, I have this world, what happens to them?
The mice quotient.
What?
There's one we're missing. I don't remember which one it is. Orson Scott Card's book on how to write science fiction and fantasy. He talks about 4 different ways that stories get started. And you guys have named 3 of the 4, and I'm trying to remember what the last one was. So excuse me, I'm going to look
That's
it up.
because we're awesome.
That's what Google was invented for.
Well, I don't know that I have the 4th way that Mr. Card would have. However, I have a word that none of you have suggested yet. It is that somehow in my twisted brain, comes into my twisted brain, the black moment. And that's why I write mystery.
Okay.
Because there is a black moment that I have to somehow get to. And that's the challenge to me.
I could see that. That's a fun way to write.
Yeah.
You're writing to the moment, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good way. I often do sometimes that with my the climactic event or the low point right before the climactic event. I'll write to that. I know what it is. The story will be kind of based, or not just solely around that, but I know it's out there, and I know I've got to get there.
That's me.
You know, I think
All right.
Larry Nevin, I think, is the type of author that, maybe this is the last one, maybe it isn't, for the types of science fiction, but he saw, the issues of the 70s when he was writing and imagined them to their, not a logical conclusion, not the logical conclusion. So, for instance, if you had, during the 70s, overpopulation was the big bugaboo. So he was thinking that,
It wasn't even that overpopulated.
well, not yet.
Not
It was
yet.
in the future. But the
I had
idea,
no idea.
the idea is that at some point the world government was, there would be a world government, was going to have to institute what we would consider draconian population control methods. So he imagined a world that
So China.
had these methods. Well, yeah, only in one of his books they were actually hunting down and killing pregnant women. But point is, it wasn't necessarily even.
Women can only carry like a few kids at a time at most.
Well, no, but that's the idea. They didn't
That's
have
not fair.
They didn't have a permit to have a kid.
If they could have whole litters, though, then it would be okay.
Well, clearly, I'm in favor of
Women
girls
had 8.
not
What do you call
dying.
that?
I'm more for the Darwinian method. If you're too stupid to figure it out, then you don't deserve to live.
See, I
So you're
would go
more in
for
favor
that,
of, like,
except if
death
anyone's
traps
seen the first
everywhere.
20 minutes of Idiocracy, that's not the way it works.
Oh,
So unfortunately, the less brilliant people are going to
Yeah,
probably make the
reproducing
most.
is one of
already
those carnal
happening.
basic things that people do even without instruction.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, there's cells all over the planet that don't even have brains, and they can reproduce.
And all I'm going to say to this is it's already happening. Hey, as a certain mime I've seen, I know Jamie saw as well, science fiction is for those, reality shows are for those who can't handle science fiction. Reality shows, enough said.
And apparently we've now moved into conspiracy theory radio.
We have
About the
kind of
mice
gone off
quotient.
topic here.
about the mice quotient, you actually did, Fedora, hit the last one. Yes, the 4, milieu, or location, which was yours. Idea, character, and event. You just had event. So, yay, all 4.
Do we turn into Captain Planet now? or-
No, we need heart and a consolation monkey first.
Well, I might be the only one at the
Capuchin.
table who uses art. I know I'm not the only one because I know several of us have resource files full of pictures to help them build their world and illustrate their characters. But
Yes.
as an illustrator in my all-the-time job, I tend to draw pictures of characters and scenes I'm getting ready to work on to get me in the mood or to muse on when I'm not working. So, like, for example, when I would go to a coffee shop or whatever, I leave whatever I was doing and I sit down, I set everything up. I usually draw a picture on a napkin first. The picture of my character in the scene that I'm getting ready to draw. And that'll get me into the world. So, I guess, can art be a muse?
I think so.
Definitely.
I do that.
Definitely.
I do that if I could draw, but I mean, I draw epic stick figures. I think that's why I write, is because I get these very visual, almost movie-like images in my head, and I can't draw, so they have to come out some way.
Every book I'm writing is a movie in my head.
Yep.
Not to mention, I know Dave's like this. I have thousands of image files that I switch out as backgrounds or will use as, slideshows or something.
Yep.
Literally for inspiration.
Yep.
Yeah, I like listening to I have this whole selection of ambient kind of music where it doesn't have lyrics or anything. It's just very long and kind of noisy. And I use those for whatever particular mood I want, And
I used to do that.
That can help. a
Now
little.
I write, or I listen to music that's faster, anything above 130 beats or so that my fingers start moving faster. I find I type way, way faster listening to house music or something like that. Something crazy and just out there. Yeah, it's been kind of crazy. Because I used to be just like you, I have a whole stack of CDs from movies that we probably all know well, their scores. But,
Yes. Actually, and like you, what I do is with my music, I listen to movie themes, or not movie themes, but movie soundtracks. But I even listen to soundtracks for movies never made yet. Just throw out a couple of bands or groups real quick. Two Steps from Hell, Immediate Music, Midnight Syndicate.
Explosions in the Sky.
There we go. And what they do is a lot of these groups will have their music show up on theme trailers, if you will. But they've come out with CDs that are made for music for movies never made. Midnight Syndicate, if I'm going to write a horror, I've got my Midnight Syndicate on because that's all horror-related music.
So I think it's interesting that it seems like you write stuff without lyrics, correct? So I tend to too, because I know if I was listening to stuff with lyrics that I would start writing those lyrics as opposed to writing my book. And I find it distracting. So either I'd be writing those lyrics or I'd be listening to that and not writing. But I think music with lyrics does also inspire me. I'll be driving in a car and hear a song on the radio, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's this scene in my book. It's describing that, which is why I think a lot of authors post playlists, what songs they listened to or what inspired them when they were writing, which I think is really fun to see, what an author used as kind of as their muse almost when they were writing. And then you can go back and kind of see if you can figure out what scene or what part of the book fits with what piece of music that they picked.
See, I listen to audiobooks that I've already listened to before. So it's the voices in the background.
The soothing sound of a human voice.
I guess so.
These are all the white noises that everyone uses, it sounds like, when they're writing, so that they can tune things out that they're not trying to focus on, not the story.
And
I think that's kind of it. If the audiobook is there, if I lose my train of thought, I listen to the audiobook instead of my mind going off into a third story, that I'm making up in my head.
What is more perfect white noise than white noise? I mean, just the noise of the house creaking and traffic on the street outside. I can't abide to have music on because I get into it, I start dancing around and totally forget what I'm writing.
My brain was built for distractibility.
Yeah.
I need something that I'm like, oh, I'm focused on this thing, so I don't have to pay attention to anything else.
I also can't write in front of windows. Can never write in front of a window. I stare out the window too much.
See, I can't write at home at all. There's no chance.
And that's why you're at Caldy's all the
That's
time.
why I go to coffee
Fabulous
shop.
place. Yeah,
Actually,
I write
multiple
best.
coffee shops.
I write best
Okay.
in coffee shops and in airports.
I actually write best at home.
And on airplanes and trains.
Yes.
I actually write best at home, but I think it's because I live alone and I can,
Yeah.
other than my dog, I can control the noise factor.
This is why I like writing best after midnight.
Yeah, when I write at
No
home,
distractions.
when I attempt to write at home, since I take care of an elderly parent, half my brain is listening for them to say God knows what. And so my mind is really distracted in a bad way.
Jamie, you had mentioned ideas in the car and lyrics and everything. And Jen, you had mentioned being inspired by art. And I think that brings me back to the whole inspiration versus the muse as something external. It seems like people's muses are changing, but I'm not sure if those are necessarily the muse because Jamie, yours is named. So, how does the inspiration work with the muse? And do you, like, I've heard some people have different ones.
I think it comes hand in hand. I mean, I think, you get the inspiration and then it just, I don't know, it kind of morphs into and becomes this one giant glob of junk that just kind of, like I said, it's like a hostile takeover. It just, it becomes this giant glob that is rooted in your brain and it just keeps expanding and, oh, now we're going to do this and now we're going to do this and, oh, you're going to write this.
Sounds like a possible alien movie.
I think I need to show the muse I don't care about it sometimes. So the reason why I started the cookbook is because the fantasy novel wasn't going well. The reason why I started the fantasy novel is because I needed to take a break from the sci-fi novel. But the point is, when I started on the cooking book, then all of a sudden, I was back to writing the fantasy novel.
Do you think part of that is because maybe your mind was too much in one direction and you needed to play more?
I think I need to give myself time to work things out in the back of my head. Now, this is the fantasy novel. I'm a plotter. I'm a serious plotter. I know what happens 100 years into the future in my stories, in general.
That never stays true for me.
Yeah, the trouble is, this fantasy book is supposed to be my attempt at seat of the pants, which, by the way, is failing. But it's more seat of the pants than anything I've ever done. But because of that, I think I am plotting in my head. So I think I need a break every so often so I can figure out what's supposed to be happening.
And on a sidebar with that, and I think Jamie wants to say something real quick. One thing, okay, she shakes her head no. The one thing's off of the muse for a second. I'm going to sidebar to this for just a second.
Oh my goodness.
I know, amazing how that happens. Anyway,
Were we on a side? How many sidebars are we on?
I can get enough sidebars to fill up the entire ocean. But
It's the
anyway,
muse's fault. They keep inspiring us to go off to the side.
exactly.
For those of you listening, you could turn this into a drinking drinking game.
Drinking game, yeah.
Just a bar.
Yeah, just drinking bar. But I know I can speak for a lot of us. We get approached by brand new writers and they say, I've written a book and I want to get it done. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I've gone through at least 10 to 12 practice novels, kind of like what Melanie was hinting at there, is, hey, this is one I'm going to write as a pantser. I've written about a good dozen practice ones before I even attempt to go out with a real one. I don't know.
I don't want to be a jerk, but I had one novel that I think I was just playing with characters and symbolism and all kind, every possible thing that you could imagine when you're writing, and then, I never finished it, and then I kind of went out and started, and then I wrote a book and I finished it and started working on that. But I think I haven't played as much as you have, but in that respect, I think every time I sit down to write a book, the process is completely different.
Yeah.
The first novel I finished, very much to the outline. The second one I outlined, but it was like, what was supposed to happen in chapter 5 ended up happening in chapter 12, and what was supposed to happen in chapter 10 got moved forward to chapter 3, and it didn't want to bend to my will, so.
And that's why now I do the storyboarding ideas, because I will go through the storyboard and then I look back and go, okay, wait a minute, this is not how it's working, and move things around. It's easy to tear apart and put back together.
Well, going back to what Kathleen was saying, in terms of inspiration versus the muse, okay, I can pull inspiration from anywhere, from a song, from art, from a bird flying across the sky. You never know. But the muse is what, when I sit down and I want to take all those ideas and I want to put them on the page, well, she's the one right there who's helping me do that. And so inspiration isn't coming when I sit in front of the page. The words might, or something like that. That's inspiring. But everything that inspired what I'm about to sit down and do, that could come from anywhere. But my muse is the one who's, actually getting the fingers going.
The funnel through which everything goes.
Exactly.
And going back to the music statement earlier, sometimes I'm listening to the music not to get inspiration or for white noise, but sometimes it's like tossing on a aerobics tape, saying to my muse, get your butt in gear.
Well, I think that's why, at least when I sit down to write, I sit down and I look at what I wrote the time before, and I think that puts me back in the scene and brings the muse back to the forefront, and helps everything just gel and flow as I go into.
So, tying up with the muse then, what really do we even know what a muse is, or what our muse is out of all this? Because obviously no one writer has the same thing muse.
I don't know what it is. Is it something out there in the greater universe? Is the greater universe? Is it stars singing, in their wavelengths that I just happen to pick up and call a muse?
It's the voices in your head, but you're not crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're the voice in my head, but,
Yeah, I don't believe that it's a Grecian god that's shanghaiing my brain and making me do things.
No.
I believe it's a part of me. It's growing up out of what's inside me and what has built me in all these years I've been alive.
Yeah,
like
is it
those
about
things.
subconscious?
Yeah, I mean all those experiences and just the stuff that I like seeing in other movies and books and songs. Those things are what make me want to write, because I want to put all the good feelings I get from the world around me and the media I consume all into one place so I can enjoy it and so other people can enjoy it. So the Muse is a part of me, you know. I guess that's what I'm thinking. Is that we
Yeah, is
talk
it your
about it.
subconscious?
Talk
Creating
about it
the words
being
that for you that you then call a muse.
well, it's almost even like deeper than that. Subconscious. If you're, it's like it's in your soul. It's part of the Play-Doh that makes you up.
Yeah, I mean, it's in your soul, it's in your head, it's in your emotions, it's in so many different pieces of you.
Well, it is pieces of you, but I'm curious about how much we externalize, going back to the Greeks and the Romans, and how they saw the Muse as something outside of themselves, through which, well, the Muse was outside of themselves and would use them as a conduit to tell whatever story it was.
Well,
Does it help to externalize for you guys, or?
Yeah, I kind of liked looking at it that way, just because it makes the stories and ideas that come to you feel a little more sacred. I think how we approach it, how we tend to approach it as like writing people, is analytically, and we tend to look at the mechanics and all that, but that's not how people read it. How people read it is holistically. And I think it helps to kind of keep that perspective of the idea of the story as like a sacred whole, as some kind of soul to it. So you don't mess with it too much, with the analysis, with the reason.
See, I don't like the idea of considering writing sacred, because you're not supposed to, tear up and rewrite sacred works here.
Well, yeah, but I mean, just to
I don't
keep
know.
the
I'm
heart
still
of it.
thinking that
You're trying to get the sacred idea to be more
Back in the day,
accurate
they
to
were-
what it should be, though.
getting a new stone and starting again.
I think I'm going to let Fedora bring us to an end, then I'm going to make one statement that I think takes what you guys are saying and apply it.
Well, I would just like to say that writing is an act of supreme arrogance.
And
We have the
insanity.
idea that we can write something that other people would not only want to read, but would somehow benefit from or enjoy. That is an act of supreme arrogance. And for me, I think the Muse gives me permission to be arrogant.
I like that.
I like that idea.
This gives you permission to have a voice.
Going back with what Matt was kind of indicating, and we've all said this, you've got the mechanics of writing, and you've got the Muse. I can sit down, as all of us can, and take a bunch of students and say, this is how you put together a story. We can teach the mechanics of the storytelling, but it's that organic aspect of the Muse that's within inside of us that actually breathes the life of the story into it. And with that, I'm going to close our first episode of The Write Pack.
Yay!
Come back next week as we continue more talks on writing. Theme songs for Write Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Write Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is a online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.